Many teams have absolutely fallen off during Formula One's time, but Caterham F1 was something else. If I gave you an hour to come up with memorable Caterham moments, you'd probably just say Heikki Kovalainen and his fire extinguisher, and then stare at the wall for 59 minutes. That's just the tip of the iceberg for what makes Caterham the absolute disaster it was.
I came in very early actually, and it was impressive seeing all the planes, which could be very useful for all our court cases. But here we go.
Once upon a time, the FIA had this new entry initiative, and the team was founded by our main character, Tony Fernandes. He's pretty much the protagonist for most of this story because he made so many ridiculous decisions. Tony wasn't the wealthiest of men in F1 terms, even though he still had a ton of money by normal standards. But now that he had a Formula One team, he had to deal with boring stuff like budgets and winning races, both of which he was absolutely failing at to a legendary degree. But there were strange things going on from the very beginning. First, the team decided the best course of action was to pool connections and get that sweet, sweet Lotus name. Well, Tony somehow took the Lotus name and got into a legal battle with Lotus. Yes, the actual Lotus car company. I will get into the specifics of this naming mess a little later, just because it would be an understatement to say that the name of the team was the only problem. Lotus Racing was struggling on track too. In the early days of the team, they were so desperate to make the grid that they didn't even have a proper factory when they were confirmed for entry. They literally just went out there and built a car in record time in some kind of shed. What resulted was the Lotus T127, a car that might as well have been built out of hopes, dreams, and whatever spare parts they could find in the couch cushions. The team did somehow manage to get themselves some talent though. The first driver they ever signed was future cult hero Heikki Kovalainen, who was spending his days trying to recover from a McLaren stint that went about as well as trying to drive blindfolded.
Hey everyone.
I think I have a problem now.
Hey, this is funny.
The team continued to build in the right direction, hiring Trulli, a man who had experienced winning races with Renault, and brought in technical director Mike Gascoigne, who had helped several midfield teams in the past, which put them in a perfect position to do the one thing all struggling F1 teams do best: get into a needlessly complicated legal dispute over their name. Prior to the 2011 season, Tony Fernandes was spending his days calling his team Team Lotus after acquiring the rights to the historic name, or so he thought. At the same time, Group Lotus, the actual car company, had aligned with the Renault F1 team. Because guess what? Renault decided they wanted to become Lotus Renault GP with black and gold livery. Group Lotus then revoked Fernandes' license to use the Lotus Racing name from 2010, driving him to use the Team Lotus name instead. So now there were two teams with Lotus in their name in 2011. One was Team Lotus in green and yellow, and the other was Lotus Renault GP in black and gold. This was somehow both the most confusing and the most hilarious thing ever. This actually went to court. Like, actual court, with judges and lawyers and everything. Tony Fernandes and Group Lotus both claimed they had the right to the name in F1. The judges' ruling? Both of them were right. Fernandes could use Team Lotus, and Group Lotus could sponsor the Renault team as Lotus. Literally nobody won. The only people who benefited were the lawyers who billed enough hours to probably buy their own F1 team.
Beginning of this year, and you said that you'd be running midfield by the mid-season.
Oh, I mean, for me personally, I always said my target was 10th. You know, we really wanted to be a column 1 team, set the bases, get the wind tunnel right.
Trulli continued to build in the right direction at Team Lotus in 2011. But here's the problem with this team. Team Lotus lived and died by their power steering. And the power steering died a lot. Hear me out. Trulli was actually a pretty talented driver. He was known as the Trulli train because once he qualified well, he would hold up faster cars in a train behind him. But when the power steering wasn't to his liking on the Team Lotus car, he was completely lost. Like, he couldn't find the apex with the GPS. Trulli had been infected by the "I can't feel the car" syndrome and ended up leading the paddock in complaints, as well as times being replaced by a reserve driver for a race. To really hammer home how crucial power steering was to the team's success and failure, Trulli drove against the Hispania racing team twice in 2011. The first time, he had proper power steering, drove beautifully, and beat them. The second time, with wonky power steering, he got outpaced by both HRT cars. In 2011, the team, as well as Kovalainen, gradually improved. Kovalainen became the first driver ever to beat an established team on pace, and as soon as things started to pick up, Team Lotus decided it was time to change their naming aspirations once again. Under Tony Fernandes' leadership, Team Lotus decided to end the Lotus name debacle once and for all by buying Caterham Cars, a British specialist sports car manufacturer, and renaming the team Caterham F1 Team from 2012 onwards. His solution to not having the Lotus name was to buy an entirely different car company and name the team after that instead.
Really looks like a real F1 team, what we've done so far. Not that we weren't before.
Starting out in 2012, the newly minted Caterham F1 team struggled again. After that, something magical started to happen. Kovalainen began to dial it in a little bit, and for maybe the first time in the team's life, his confidence wasn't scale-baking as he realized that the team was what it was, and they didn't need to be so desperate in their attempt to score points. That discipline showed in Monaco, where Kovalainen dropped a signature 13th place finish, ahead of a struggling Jenson Button, without even needing a chaotic race to do it. He was so serious that he even stopped complaining to the press about the car's performance for like a day or two. After he started being more consistent, Caterham became the best backmarket team. They coasted through most of the season, being the clear best of the 3 new teams from 2010, and everything was just going their way, which in the context of being a backmarker meant they were still finishing 20 seconds behind the next car, but they were just doing it more reliably now. After they finished the season with a 0-point campaign, Caterham clinched 10th in the championship because that's how it worked back then. The crucial 10th place finish came in the final race, when Vitaly Petrov, who had replaced Jarno Trulli before the season in a totally not-about-money move, pulled off the $10 million pass by overtaking Charles Pics Marussia in Brazil to secure 11th place. That was important because the championship tiebreaker was the best finish. Caterham had 11th, Marussia only had 12th, and 10th in the championship meant prize money. Lots of it. Quite literally, that single overtake was worth 8 figures. Caterham had done the impossible and escaped another year by the skin of their teeth. It was all uphill from there. They were primed to finally score points and become a proper midfield team the next year, right? They didn't.
I'm kidding, honestly. I mean, tell him to get out of the way.
Attention Caterham fans, I'm sure both of you are still with me. I hope you've had fun so far, because for the last couple of minutes it's been a lot of laughs, but from now on it's pretty much always going to be misery for the rest of this, because just as quickly as Caterham rose, they fell. And while I have you both, if you like this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I'm closing in on 25,000 subscribers by F1 summer break, and that just sounds cool. Caterham's wild 2012 kept going when they decided, for totally 100% competitive reasons and definitely nothing to do with sponsor money, to get rid of both their drivers for 2013. Kovalainen, despite being their best driver by far, was shown the door because he wouldn't bring sponsorship money. In came Charles Pic, the very guy Petrov had passed for that crucial 10th place, and Guido van der Garde, a Dutch pay driver whose main qualifications seemed to be has access to a large bank account. What ensued was a fiasco of performances, as Caterham, from weeks 1 through 19, got outperformed and outscored by Marussia. It only got worse from there. Not only was van der Garde terrible, having to be told via team radio to actually use his mirrors when being lapped. Not only was Pic completely anonymous and barely mentioned all season, but Marussia had a young French driver, Jules Bianchi, who was actually talented, and he managed to finish 13th in Malaysia. Since Caterham's best result was 14th, Marussia now owned the coveted Best of the Worst title and the 10th place in the Constructors' Championship that came with it. I don't think having Mark Webber call your driver a pay driver with no mirrors after a collision is the greatest thing, but what do I know about building F1 teams? As the 2013 season faded away, along with the legend of the $10 million pass, reality began to set in. 2014 would be different, right? There were new regulations with hybrid engines being introduced, which meant all the teams would be developing new cars. This was Caterham's big chance. Except they needed money for that, and sponsors were rapidly losing interest in a team that couldn't even beat Marussia anymore. They started to try and get some talent back on the roster. A famous face returned to F1 as Caterham signed Kamui Kobayashi, a Japanese driver loved by fans for his bonsai overtaking moves, who had been dropped by Sauber and spent a year racing for Ferrari in GT cars. Kobayashi was so desperate to return to F1 that he actually crowdfunded part of his salary from fans.
At the end of the first lap, on the grass there, Grosjean. That's going to allow Jenson Button in, Kobayashi as well. Button's got squeezed in between the middle of them. Grosjean manages to stay ahead. Kobayashi down the inside now, and he makes a great...
The other driver was Marcus Ericsson, the Swedish rookie who had never shown much brilliance in junior categories, but had a boatload of sponsor cash. One good driver plus money, that could work, right? Except Caterham's 2014 car, the CT5, was so hideous that it literally scared children. It had this bizarre green nose with two prongs sticking out that looked like, well, I won't use the exact words that were being thrown around, but let's just say it was quickly nicknamed the vacuum cleaner by the politer journalists. The car wasn't just ugly, it was slow. Like, monumentally, embarrassingly slow. In 2014, Caterham had a pretty huge negative media storm when Kobayashi's brakes failed at the very first corner of the season in Australia, causing him to wipe out Felipe Massa's Williams. They got through it, and in the next race, wait, they didn't finish that either. For the most part, through the first half of the season, Caterham were struggling to even see the checkered flag. The biggest hit came in July, when Tony Fernandes, who earlier declared F1 hasn't worked, finally gave up. He sold the team to a mysterious Swiss-Arab consortium who refused to name its investors publicly. This was the start of the most bizarre chapter yet.
I saw one for the Windmill Inn, which apparently is in Littleworth. It's not often you get a pub sponsoring the side of the car.
With Kobayashi racing essentially for free, money running out, and mysterious new owners who seemed more interested in cutting costs than racing, Caterham began their final death spiral. By Russia, they were literally retiring healthy cars just to save mileage on parts. Kobayashi spilled the beans on social media, revealing that they ordered him to retire a perfectly functioning car simply because they didn't have enough spares in stock and worried that something might break. Think about that for a second. They entered a race spending hundreds of thousands to fly cars, equipment, and personnel to Russia, and then pulled a healthy car out because they were too broke to risk a part failing. After that race, things got truly unhinged. The new owners, it turned out, hadn't actually paid Tony Fernandes. He still held the shares. They were running the team anyway, or maybe they had paid. Both sides were throwing accusations left and right. Meanwhile, suppliers who hadn't been paid forced Caterham Sports Ltd, the company that actually built the cars, into administration. That's the British version of bankruptcy protection. So now you had Tony Fernandes saying he still owned the team because he hadn't been paid, the mysterious new owners saying they had paid, but Fernandes wouldn't transfer the shares, the car building part of the company administration, and the actual F1 entry, which was a separate company still trying to go racing. It was at this point that someone noticed an incredible fact. In the midst of all the corporate shuffling, the administrators discovered that Caterham Sports Ltd's sole shareholder was listed as a Romanian janitor, a man named Constantin Coiocaru, who worked in the factory as a cleaner, was somehow, on paper, the legal owner of the company that built F1 cars. He had no idea that his name had been used in this way. It was what the administrators later called the most blatant attempt to manufacture a Phoenix company they'd ever seen. The whole team missed the United States and Brazilian Grand Prix, and it seemed like they were done for good. Then came, perhaps, the most bizarre moment in modern F1 history, a crowdfunding campaign to get them to the final race in Abu Dhabi. They actually asked fans to donate money so they could make the grid one last time, and you know what? The madmen did it. They literally raised over $1 million and made it to the last race just in time. They had Kobayashi in one car and Will Stevens, a paying driver who forked over £500,000 for a single race, in the other. The team's garage was half empty, most of their equipment had been repossessed, and their team principal for the weekend was literally Finbar O'Connell, the administrator handling their bankruptcy. An accountant was running an F1 team for its last race. In one final act of this comedy, Bernie Ecclestone banned O'Connell from standing on the grid with the other team bosses before the race. Apparently, having a corporate undertaker visible on TV was a step too far, even for Bernie. O'Connell later quipped that he was disappointed because insolvency practitioners don't get out much. Kobayashi's car didn't finish the race. It was retired with a mysterious vibration. The team later admitted they were worried the chassis itself might have a crack in it, but they didn't have the equipment to properly check. Stevens did finish in last place, 2 laps down. With that, Caterham F1 took its final checkered flag. Over the following months, everything the team owned, from factory equipment to the cars themselves, was auctioned off. Administrator Finbar O'Connell spent the winter of 2014 trying to find a buyer for the team. Despite some reported interest, including rumors of an Indian consortium and a mysterious American investor, no deal materialized. By February 2015, the administrators had run out of options. Caterham had been absent from preseason testing, their entry for the 2015 championship hadn't been confirmed, and creditors were banging on the door. The inevitable was announced. Everything would be sold at auction. The auction itself was a morbid spectacle, like watching vultures pick clean the carcass of what had once been a proud racing team. Hosted by auction house Wiles Hardy & Co., it was conducted both in person at the Leafield factory and online. What was sold? Literally everything. Full F1 cars from multiple seasons, spare monocoques, front and rear wings, suspension components, race suits, team apparel, pit equipment, the factory's entire machine shop, office furniture, computers. There were even listings for the contents of the staff kitchen. Yes, you could bid on the team's coffee machine, toaster, and microwave. It was a garage sale meets corporate liquidation on an industrial scale. Some items fetched decent prices. A complete 2013 Caterham F1 car sold for $82,000, which is actually a bargain considering the millions it cost to build. Other cars and major components were bought by wealthy collectors or amateur racing series. Many smaller items, including some genuinely rare F1 memorabilia, were literally sold on eBay to the highest bidder, with reserves as low as $15. Perhaps the most poignant items were those that hinted at Caterham's unrealized ambitions. Their wind tunnel model, representing countless hours of aerodynamic development that never translated to on-track performance, was sold for a fraction of its development cost. A 50% scale model of the 2015 car, the machine that would never race, was purchased by an unknown collector. The staff, meanwhile, scattered to the winds. Over 230 employees were made redundant, joining the diaspora of ex-F1 personnel looking for work in motorsport or engineering. Some found positions at other teams, others left racing entirely. A handful even followed the Caterham name to other racing series as the brand continued in smaller categories even after the F1 team's demise. The Leafield Technical Center itself, once home to 3 failed F1 teams, Arrows, Super Guri, and Caterham, stood empty for several years, a 28,000 square meter monument to broken racing dreams. Eventually, it was repurposed for non-motorsport businesses, closing the book on its star-crossed racing history. In a sport where true characters and unpredictability are increasingly rare, Caterham reminds us that F1 can still produce narratives so bizarre that they defy fiction. They may never have scored a championship point, they managed to score countless points for unintentional comedy. In that sense, perhaps they were successful after all. In the immortal words that should have been Caterham's team motto, "We're not last, we're just differently positioned." Was there a funnier end to a racing team ever? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.